The number on the screen is one Tariq hasn't seen in 14 months. He knows it before he even reads the name. 7 digits, same area code as the building he used to walk into at 6:45 every morning. Coffee in one hand, badge in the other. The same walk he made almost 4,000 times without ever once being late. He built that badge system. He built half of what's inside that building, piece by piece. Over 9 years, nobody in that boardroom ever fully understood. He lets it ring twice. Not because he's deciding whether to answer, because he wants to feel it. The exact shape of this moment. The one he pictured more times than he'd ever admit out loud, lying awake at 2 in the morning some nights, running the scene forward like a movie he couldn't stop rewinding. Tariq speaking. Silence on the other end. Then a breath. Then a voice he'd know anywhere. Bram Whitfield. The man who sat across the boardroom table 14 months ago and told him the company was moving in a different direction. The same phrase every company uses when they don't have the courage to say the real reason out loud. Different direction meant Corwin Ashby. Younger, cheaper, related, distantly, to someone on the board who golfed with someone else on the board. Tariq had built the operations system that kept the company running for 9 years, quietly, without fanfare, the kind of work that only gets noticed the moment it stops happening. Corwin had built a LinkedIn post about disruptive leadership 3 days after he got the job. 42 comments, most of them from people who didn't work there. "I need to talk to you," Bram says. "Off the record." Off the record. That's rich. There was no off the record when they walked Tariq out with a cardboard box and a security escort like he was the one who'd done something wrong. Like 9 years of loyalty amounted to a liability the moment someone cheaper became available. Here's what nobody in that boardroom understood, and what you're about to understand before Tariq lets himself admit it. Some people don't get pushed out because they failed. They get pushed out because they made themselves too easy to replace with someone convenient, someone who looked better on a budget sheet, even if he understood nothing about what actually kept the lights on. Rewind 2 years, before any of this. Tariq is the guy who stays until 9 fixing a shipping error nobody else caught. The guy who answers his phone on a Sunday because a client in a different time zone has a problem that can't wait until Monday. He's the one who trains 3 different assistants for Corwin's cousin's roommate, whoever the board wants trained. No questions, no complaints. He builds the systems, writes the manuals, documents every process so clearly that a child could follow it, because that's what a responsible person does. That's what he was taught being good at your job looked like. Turns out, that was the problem. He made himself replaceable on purpose, because that's what a good employee does. And nobody tells you that being replaceable is exactly how they justify replacing you the moment the math looks better with someone younger in the seat. "I'm listening," Tariq says, keeping his voice level, giving nothing away. "Things have gotten complicated," Bram says, choosing the word carefully, the way people choose words when they're trying not to say the true one. Corwin's approach isn't landing the way the board hoped. Tariq knows exactly what that means. He's seen the headlines. 2 major clients gone in the last quarter, both of them accounts he'd nursed along personally for years. A shipping contract fumbled so badly, it made the local business paper. The same shipping contract Tariq used to personally walk through every renewal, line by line, because he knew exactly where the old system's weak points were and exactly how to keep them from ever becoming visible to a client. Nobody else knew where those weak points were. Tariq never wrote that part down. Some knowledge only lives in the person who earned it, and he'd earned every bit of his the hard way. "We'd like you to come back and consult," Bram says. "Just short term, get things stabilized, and then we can talk about what comes next." And here's the moment you need to sit in, because this is the whole story compressed into one breath. The man who told Tariq he wasn't needed anymore is now calling to ask for exactly what only Tariq can give him. Not a version of it. Not something similar. The exact thing. Tariq doesn't answer right away. He's not being dramatic. He's doing math. The kind of math he's been doing quietly for 14 months without ever telling anyone he was keeping score. 14 months ago, this call would have felt like vindication. Today it feels like something else. Quieter, heavier, more interesting than relief. Because Tariq isn't the same person who got walked out with a cardboard box. That version of him would have said yes before Bram finished the sentence, grateful just to matter to someone again. This version of him has had 14 months to build something Bram doesn't know exists yet. Something that changes every single calculation happening on the other end of this call. "Let me think about it," Tariq says. "I'll call you back." He hangs up before Bram can respond. He sits there for a long moment in the quiet of a home office that used to be a guest room, the one they never got around to converting into anything else because for the first 6 months after he left, converting it felt like admitting something was over. Leverage. What Tariq does next is going to depend entirely on what he's built in the 14 months since that badge stopped working. And whether the person on the other end of that shipping contract disaster even knows his name yet, or thinks he's just some vendor his predecessor happened to like. You're going to want to know what he decides. So am I. 14 months ago, Tariq didn't leave that building empty-handed the way everyone assumed. Everyone pictured a man carrying a cardboard box of desk photos and nothing else, humiliated and hollowed out. That's not what actually happened, even if it's what it looked like from the outside. He left with a laptop bag, a box of desk photos, and a folder in his personal email he'd been quietly building for 3 years. Every process he wrote, every system he designed, every client relationship he nurtured personally, backed up under his own name, dated, time-stamped, completely legal, completely his. Nobody had ever told him to protect himself that carefully. He just always had a feeling that loyalty in that building was a one-way street, and he'd been driving it alone for 9 years without saying so out loud to anyone, including himself. His wife, Lena, is the one who finds him still sitting in the office chair 20 minutes after the call ends, phone face down on the desk like it might ring again on its own. Like ignoring it could somehow undo what had already been said. "Who was that?" she asks. Not really a question. She already recognizes the area code from 14 months of watching him flinch every time it showed up somewhere unexpected. "Bram." Lena doesn't say anything right away. She just sits on the arm of the old recliner they never replaced, the one from their first apartment, worn soft in exactly the shape of the two of them, and waits. Because she's learned over 15 years of marriage that Tariq needs the silence before he needs the conversation. "They want me back," he says finally. "Consulting. Short term." "After they walked you out like you stole something." "After that, yeah." This is the part of the story worth staying for, because if you've ever been the person who did everything right and still got shown the door, you already know what this moment feels like. It's not anger. Anger burned off months ago, somewhere between the unemployment paperwork and the first client who found him through word of mouth. It's something colder and more useful. Clarity. If this story is already living somewhere in your chest, hit subscribe. Wet Teddy's just getting started, and this one's going to get a lot more satisfying before it's over. Here's what Bram doesn't know yet, and what you're about to learn before Tariq lets himself say it out loud. The shipping contract disaster in the business paper isn't a coincidence. It's not bad luck, and it's not Corwin having a rough quarter that'll sort itself out. It's the direct, predictable result of a system Tariq built with 3 specific safeguards. Safeguards that only worked because Tariq personally maintained the relationships behind them, week after week, year after year, in ways that never showed up on any org chart. Relationships Corwin inherited on paper and immediately let rot, because relationships aren't line items, and nobody ever explained to Corwin that a contract is only as strong as the person maintaining it. There's a shipping vendor named Petra Voss who Tariq called every single Friday for 6 years. Not because the contract required it, but because that's how you keep a good vendor loyal when 3 competitors are circling for the account with better rates and shinier promises. Corwin never called her once. Not once in 14 months. Not a single Friday. Tariq found that out from Petra herself, 3 months ago, over coffee she requested out of nowhere, nervous the whole time about whether reaching out to him was even allowed anymore. She didn't know if she was allowed to reach out. She reached out anyway, because some habits of respect outlast the paperwork that used to justify them. They lost the West Coast distribution deal too, Lena says, scrolling on her phone at the kitchen table, the blue light catching the worry on her face. It's all over the trade sites. People are calling it a leadership failure. Tariq already knows. He's been quietly tracking every domino since the day he left. Not out of bitterness, he tells himself, though some nights it's hard to be sure that's entirely true, but out of habit. Old habits don't know they've been fired. They just keep running in the background, waiting for someone to need them again. "What did you tell him?" Lena asks, setting the phone down. "That I'd think about it." "Are you going to say yes?" Tariq looks at the phone again, screen dark now, the missed call notification long gone. 14 months ago, he would have said yes on the spot, grateful just to be wanted again, grateful for the simple dignity of someone needing what he had to offer. But somewhere in those 14 months, without fully deciding to, he built something Bram has no idea exists. A second client, then a third. Small companies, the kind that couldn't afford someone like him full-time, but could afford him by the hour. And every single one of them found him through word of mouth, through people who remembered exactly who actually kept that old company running while someone else took the credit for the parts that worked and blamed him quietly for the parts that didn't. "I'm going to call him back tomorrow," Tariq says, but not to say yes. Lena raises an eyebrow, the same look she's given him for 15 years whenever he's about to do something she can already tell she'll end up being proud of. "Then what?" "I'm going to find out how bad it really is first," he says. "Because if it's as bad as I think it is, short-term consulting isn't going to fix it. It's going to be a bandage on something that needs surgery, and I'm not interested in being a bandage." You need to remember that sentence, because by the time this story is over, you're going to understand exactly what Tariq means by it, and exactly how much it's going to cost the people who thought he was replaceable in the first place. Tariq doesn't call Bram back the next morning like he said he would. He calls Petra Voss instead, because if he's going to walk back into that building, he wants to walk in already knowing more than they expect him to know. "You said the West Coast deal fell through," he says. No hello, straight into it, because that's the kind of relationship they've built over 6 years. No small talk, just the truth, fast. The way 2 people talk when they both respect each other's time too much to waste it. 3 weeks ago, Petra says. They're already scrambling for a backup vendor. Corwin's been sending emails to people who left the industry 2 years ago, people who don't even answer that account anymore. Tariq laughs, but it's not a happy sound. It's the laugh of a man watching a house he built with his own hands get gutted by someone who never learned where the load-bearing walls were, someone who thought decoration was structure. Here's the part I want you to really sit with, because it's the whole engine of this story. Corwin didn't fail because he was incompetent in some obvious, cartoonish way. He failed because he inherited a machine built by someone else and assumed the machine would keep running on its own, forever, without maintenance, without care, without anyone ever asking why it worked in the first place. He never once asked why. He just assumed it always would. That's the pattern reveal. You're seeing it now, clean and whole, laid out in front of you like a diagram. Corwin doesn't know it yet. Bram barely knows it, not really, not in the specific way Tariq knows it. Tariq is the only one who's known it from the start, and he's been quiet about it for 14 months because nobody asked him. Somebody's finally asking. "Send me everything you have," Tariq tells Petra. Not to fix it yet, just so I understand exactly how deep it goes before I walk back in there. What arrives in his inbox over the next 2 days isn't just a shipping contract disaster. It's a paper trail. Missed vendor calls, 3 canceled quality audits that used to catch problems before clients ever saw them, a client retention program Tariq designed personally that Corwin quietly discontinued 6 months in because he thought it was inefficient. Efficient for who? Tariq wonders, turning the word over like it means something different every time he reads it. Efficient compared to what? He starts making a list. Not for Bram, for himself. By the second night, Lena finds him at the kitchen table with 3 notebooks open and a spreadsheet on his laptop that looks less like consulting notes and more like an autopsy. Dates and dollar amounts lined up in neat, damning columns. "You're not going back to fix this quietly, are you?" she says. It's not a question. 15 years of marriage means she can read the set of his jaw better than he can read it himself. "No." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to name my price," Tariq says, "and it's not going to be an hourly consulting rate." Here's a question worth sitting with, the same one that's been circling this whole story since the moment that phone rang. When the people who discarded you finally realize they need exactly what you had, do you help them quietly and let the past go? Or do you make them say, out loud, in front of the people who agreed to replace you, that they were wrong? Tell me in the comments. Would you go back and fix it for them? Or make them earn it back first? The next morning, Tariq calls Bram, not with an answer, with a condition, one he spent the whole night deciding how to phrase. "I'll come in," Tariq says, "but not as a consultant, and not to talk to you first." There's a long silence on the line, the kind that tells Tariq everything he needs to know about how desperate things actually are. Longer than any silence Bram has ever left him in 9 years of working together. "Who do you want to talk to?" Bram finally asks, his voice smaller than Tariq remembers it. "The full board," Tariq says. "Same room they walked me out of. And I want Corwin there too." Bram doesn't argue. That alone tells Tariq more than any spreadsheet could have. The boardroom hasn't changed. Same table, same view of the parking lot, same chair Tariq sat in the day they told him the company was moving in a different direction. He notices that detail immediately, the way you notice a scar you thought had faded. They didn't even bother giving him a different chair, as if the room had been waiting for him to come back to exactly where he left off. Bram is already seated when Tariq walks in, papers stacked too neatly in front of him, the posture of a man rehearsing something in his head. So is the rest of the board, faces Tariq recognizes, some of whom voted to let him go without a single question. Corwin arrives 4 minutes late, phone in hand, the kind of late that says he doesn't think this meeting is really about him. He's wrong. "Thanks for coming in," Bram starts, and Tariq can already hear the shape of the speech Bram rehearsed in the car on the way here. Something about fresh perspective, about valuing experience, about how the company's always considered Tariq part of the family, the same warm language people use right before they ask you for something they have no right to ask for. Tariq lets him get about 30 seconds into it before he sets a single folder on the table, the sound of it landing louder than it should be in a room that quiet. "I'm not here for the speech," he says. "I'm here because you called me, not the other way around. So let's skip to the part where I tell you what's actually broken." He opens the folder. Inside is the autopsy. 3 canceled quality audits, the client retention program quietly discontinued, 6 months of vendor calls that never happened, the exact dollar figure attached to the West Coast deal that fell through because nobody called Petra Voss on a Friday, the number circled twice in red. Corwin shifts in his seat, the first crack in the posture he walked in with. This is the moment his whole approach gets named out loud, in a room full of people who signed off on replacing the person who actually understood why any of it worked in the first place. "This isn't personal," Tariq says, and he means it mostly, though there's a small human part of him that's enjoying this more than he'll admit later tonight. "This is what happens when you inherit a system and never ask why it worked in the first place. You don't fix a machine by assuming the parts don't matter. You fix it by understanding every single one of them, the boring ones especially. Nobody in the room says anything. Bram's jaw is tight, his knuckles pale against the edge of the table. One board member, an older woman named Miriam, who's been quiet the whole meeting, watching everything with the patience of someone who's sat through 100 meetings like this one, is the first to speak. "What would it take," she asks, "for you to fix this?" This is the moment. This is the whole story distilled into one sentence, and Tariq has known exactly what he was going to say since the night he sat at his kitchen table with 3 notebooks open, tracing every domino back to the day nobody called Petra Voss. "Not a consulting rate," he says. "A seat at this table, full operational authority, and Corwin reports to me, not the other way around, for as long as it takes to fix what's broken." Corwin's face goes through 3 different expressions in under 2 seconds. Disbelief, offense, then something smaller and more honest underneath both of those. Fear. Because some part of him has known, probably since month 2, that he was never actually running this place. He was just standing where someone more capable used to stand, wearing a title that never quite fit. "That's a significant ask," Bram says, choosing his words carefully again. "It's not an ask," Tariq says. "It's the only version of this where the West Coast deal doesn't happen again in 6 months, with a different vendor's name attached to it." Miriam looks around the table, meeting each board member's eyes one at a time. Nobody argues with the math. The math is sitting right there in the folder, dollar signs and dates undeniable. The kind of evidence that doesn't need a lawyer to interpret it. "Give us the room," Bram finally says to Tariq. "We need to discuss it." Tariq stands, closes the folder, and picks it back up with him, because he's not leaving the receipts behind this time, not after everything it cost him to build them. "Take your time," he says. "I've got somewhere else I could be." He walks out past Corwin without looking at him. He doesn't need to. Some victories don't require eye contact to land. Tariq waits in the parking lot for 40 minutes, not pacing, not checking his phone every 30 seconds like a man desperate for an answer, just sitting in his car with the windows down, watching the same building he used to walk into at 6:45 every morning, thinking about how strange it feels to be on the outside of a decision that's entirely about him. His phone buzzes. Not Bram, Petra. "Heard you're in there right now. Whatever happens, you already fixed it just by walking in." He doesn't respond yet. He's still watching the front doors, watching for any sign of what's happening behind them. Here's what's happening on the other side of that glass, the part Tariq doesn't get to see, but you do. Bram is arguing for a compromise. Bring Tariq back as a senior advisor, keep Corwin in his title, split the authority down some diplomatic middle that protects everyone's ego, except the one person who actually knows how to fix anything. Miriam isn't having it. "We already tried the version where we protect egos," she says, her voice cutting through the room like she said this exact sentence in her head 100 times before finally saying it out loud. "That's how we got here. He's not asking for revenge. He's asking for exactly what the job requires. If we water it down, we're back in this room in 6 months, except there won't be a Tariq willing to walk back through that door a second time." Corwin, to his credit, doesn't fight it as hard as everyone expects. Something in him already knew. He spent 14 months feeling like a man driving a car he's never actually learned to steer, blaming the road every time he clips a curb, blaming the vendors, blaming the market, blaming anything except the gap in his own understanding. Being told the truth out loud, in front of the board, is almost a relief. Almost. "I'd rather learn from him than lose everything pretending I don't need to," Corwin says quietly. It's the first honest thing he's said in the entire meeting, and it lands heavier in the room than anything Tariq brought in that folder. That single sentence changes the vote. 43 minutes after Tariq walked out, Bram appears at the front doors, jacket slightly rumpled, the posture of a man who just lost an argument he didn't fully believe in to begin with. Tariq watches him cross the parking lot, and for the first time all day, he lets himself feel something close to satisfaction. Not triumph, not yet. Just the quiet certainty of a man who already knew what the answer would have to be. "We agree to your terms," Bram says, leaning into the car window. "Full operational authority. Corwin reports to you. We'll draft the agreement this week." Tariq nods slowly, like he's turning the moment over in his hands, checking it for weight, making sure it's real before he lets himself believe it. "I'll need Petra's contract reinstated at full terms, backdated. And I want the quality audits back on the calendar by Friday." "Done," Bram says, faster than Tariq expects. Desperation moves quickly once it stops pretending to be dignity. As Bram walks back toward the building, Tariq sits there a moment longer, phone still in his lap, Petra's message still glowing on the screen. He thinks about the version of himself who got walked out with a cardboard box 14 months ago, humiliated in front of coworkers who wouldn't meet his eyes, carrying 9 years of work in a single trip to the parking lot. That man couldn't have imagined this parking lot, this phone call, this version of the story. But this version was only possible because he never stopped building. Quietly, patiently, without needing anyone in that boardroom to notice, without needing the validation to arrive on any particular schedule. He starts the engine. Tomorrow, he goes back through the front doors. Not as the man they walked out, as the one they need most. Tariq walks through the front doors at 7:15 the next morning, earlier than he ever used to, earlier than the badge readers even expect anyone to arrive. Nobody's there to escort him this time. He doesn't need one. The office looks the same and completely different at once. Same layout, same break room coffee machine that's been broken since before he left. But the energy of the place has shifted overnight. The way a house feels different the moment everyone in it knows who's actually in charge. Corwin is already at his desk when Tariq passes by, dressed a little more plainly than usual, like a man who's decided posturing isn't going to help him anymore. He looks up, and there's a beat where neither of them says anything. "I owe you an apology," Corwin says finally. "Not for the board thing. For not asking you questions when I had the chance. I thought asking would make me look like I didn't belong here." "Asking is the only reason anyone belongs anywhere," Tariq says. He doesn't say it unkindly. He's not interested in humiliating a man who's already humiliated himself in front of the people who matter most in this building. "Come find me at 9. We'll start with Petra's account. You're going to make that call yourself this time." Corwin nods, and for the first time in 14 months, Tariq watches someone in that building actually listen. Really listen. The way people listen when they've finally understood what's at stake. By the end of the week, the quality audits are back on the calendar. Petra's contract is reinstated, full terms, backdated exactly as promised. The West Coast deal isn't back yet, but 2 smaller distributors have already reached out on their own, word traveling the way it always does in an industry small enough to remember who actually keeps their word and who just talks about keeping it. That night, Lena finds Tariq at the kitchen table again, but this time there are no notebooks open, no spreadsheet glowing on the laptop. Just him, sitting quietly, looking almost surprised by how ordinary it feels to have won. "You didn't even gloat," she says, sliding into the chair across from him. "Didn't need to," Tariq says. "The org chart already said everything I needed it to say." Here's what I keep coming back to with this one. The version of Tariq who got walked out with a cardboard box wasn't a failure. He was a man who'd made himself indispensable and got punished for it by people who mistook reliability for weakness. It took 14 months and 1 desperate phone call for them to learn the difference. Some people only learn a lesson once it costs them everything it was supposed to prevent. If you've ever been quietly excellent at something and watched someone else get the credit for it, I hope you got your version of that boardroom. And if you haven't yet, I hope this was a little bit of permission to keep building anyway, quietly, on your own terms, until the day someone finally has to call and ask. That's the story that started with a phone call from a number Tariq swore he'd never hear from again, and ended with him walking back through those doors as the person they couldn't survive without. I'm Hani. People always show you who they are. Wet Teddy just slows it down. I'll see you in the next one.